Your student has some degree of hearing loss. Therefore, this makes it difficult for them to hear what you have to say, and it's difficult for them to communicate to you what they need. After all, they don't know what they can't hear. So, they're going to come to you with some sort of hearing assistive technology. I'm here to explain how that works in the larger scope. First of all, we're going to start with a transmitter and a receiver. A transmitter is like a voice, and a receiver is like an ear. So since there is impaired communication between those two things, there's going to be some technology that will help. Now, there are lots of different kinds of transmitters and lots of different kinds of receivers. And the combination of transmitter and receiver that your student arrives with is going to vary depending on their hearing needs. And that's going to be a unique combination. I will give you more instruction about the specific transmitter that you will be using and the specific receiver that your student will be wearing. But let's just talk about the point and how this whole thing works. In the classroom, you are going to be talking and your student is going to be listening, right? So, we want to optimize the hearing environment so that they have good access to their instruction. You, therefore, will be wearing the transmitter, and they will be wearing the receiver. There are a couple things that help this work better. But first of all, let's talk about the auditory environment. In a classroom, you have a floor which gets loud because there are chairs being moved on that floor. There are tables that are being moved on that floor. There is a door that is opening and closing. There are windows, and there are people outside and vehicles outside. And outside this doorway, there's a hallway, and lots of people are in the hallway. So, and then on top of that, there are children sitting in the chairs, and they talk to one another. And they have papers, and they have books, and they have all sorts of things that fall onto the floor, that get moved around. There are lots of children talking to each other and having a great time. But it all kind of adds up to a lot of background noise. Oh, there's another thing you have in your classrooms is you have heaters or air conditioners. And so those are always blowing air. And then some of you have fish tanks, so they have noise as well. Sometimes there are loud lights in the classroom. The fluorescent lights especially make noise. And so there's a lot going on in there. You know your experience when you go to a crowded restaurant and you're sitting next to people at the same table and they're 2 feet away from you, and you really have such a hard time hearing what they have to say. So you rely a lot on visual cues and reading their lips and body language and context of things that you know about. Well, your student doesn't have the advantage of that context because you're giving them new information. So it's difficult for them to pick up the vocabulary, the concepts, the context, and connect it to other information that they already have existing in their heads, because you are expanding their worldview rather than talking about the worldview. So pretty soon, with all of these things, you have a whole lot of background noise, all that's going on, and your student with hearing loss is awash. They are sitting 1 foot away from somebody in a restaurant and they can't hear them. You, on the other hand, are standing, well, I'm you are standing up here and you're talking, and here is, the language of instruction, right? So you've got the sound here, but what's happening without any technology is that your voice is dropping down and getting lost in this background information. So the transmitter that you are going to be wearing, generally in your pocket or around your neck, is going to take your voice, and your student is going to be wearing a receiver of one kind or another, and this transmitter is going to take your voice and take it directly to your students' ears. That way, there is this gap, and this is really important because when you're in that crowded restaurant, if that voice that you're paying attention to was just louder, then you would be able to hear that voice above all the other background information, right? So we want to create that gap here for you. This transmitter will create that gap, and this equipment is dynamic so that as the background noise gets louder, then it will amplify the language of instruction. And as the background noise gets softer, it will bring the background noise down softer, maintaining a steady gap in signal so that your student is going to know where to pay attention to and what is the pertinent information. And that's it. I will then send you some information about different kinds of transmitters and different kinds of receivers.